Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you're new to this channel, or you have not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they're live, and there's a PayPal link in the info box below the video once it's rendered. But most importantly, if you would like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below the video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show. Sharing the show increases the live audience, of course, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show. And one last time, if you are new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Tim Osman, Plain Truth, Alan, Sleeping Warrior, and Ranty. How are you all doing? Beep, beep.
That was impressive.
That's pretty loud, wasn't
That's
it?
what makes it join.
There you go. I'm here.
I don't normally have him turned up for when he beeps. He was that time. So I've got you up displayed, Ranty, from tailing off from the last show. There was a conversation for the 5 minutes we were off air, but you wanted to show Tim Osman something. You might as well just show it now. We're back on air.
Yeah. Oh well. Now that we've got that up, I might as well just show you the.
Got that Jason bit in, right? My Jason bit.
No, sorry.
Oh, dude, you should have told me, man. I would have saved that bit for now, dude.
You can do it again if you want.
Right. So essentially, this is a screenshot that I took. I think it's a screen. Yes, this is a screenshot that I took from the video from that rock. That I'm going to show the video in a minute. So again, these buildings should be long gone behind the curve. You shouldn't see any of these. And I'm going to show you the video from the rock. So here I am, right next to the water. There's my tripod set at about 1.5 feet. I'm going to lower the line, just to give you an angular size here to say, well, how low down is this rock? If that's 1.5 feet, I'm going to say that's probably 2 or 3 inches. Tim Osman thinks it's nearer to 5 inches.
I'd say at least 30 meters, Ranty.
Well, if we say 5 inches and go along with the ball of position on that, all I'm going to do.
Have you measured that tripod?
That tripod?
Yeah.
Well, I believe it's 18 inches.
Wow. Not trying to be a dick or anything, but will somebody in the Flat Earth donate a camera to one of your most working men in the Flat Earth? Seriously, why not? I mean, shit, I'd give you one, dude. I just don't want to send it overseas.
Yeah, well, here we are zooming in, and you can.
Somebody said that you could get a decent tripod from 20 quid on Amazon, but I don't think that's probably.
No.
The lightweight plastic ones are not that good.
Your tripod's 100 quid.
Yeah. What is that in US? Quid?
$130, $140.
Yeah.
Bucks.
At least that's where it starts at.
Quid is bucks in American.
Is that my PC playing up there that was doing all that fuzziness?
It's not 1-to-1 though.
So yeah, so there's me just stopping the video at some point when it focuses, but you can essentially see those buildings easily enough. You can identify the buildings.
You should take how much you can see of that pole that you were using for parallax before. See if you can see the same amount. Seems like it was a bit smaller there.
Well, don't forget that the pole's in the water, so as the tide goes up and down, you get a different tide height. So this time it might be a 1 meter tide. At another time it could be a 2 meter tide that I'm actually filming at. So essentially you'll have that water rising up the height of the pole anyway.
I have a question since we've really, I think, killed this discussion. My question is, like, if you were to zoom all the way back into the shoreline and you're looking at the object, the scale on the horizon my question is, what's the scale per inch? You know, so if you know what the length of the object is, wouldn't you be able to scale the horizon relatively accurately to see what that axis is from left to right, so that you could then estimate if you were to back all the way to the shoreline and you can't see anything but the horizon, because you know what the scale is of that object, you could actually work out what that horizontal line, the distance from left to right would be. So then you could actually say we should be seeing this much curve on that horizontal line. Do you
Yeah, this has
understand
been done.
Oh, on the x-axis.
Let me ask you that really quickly. Yeah,
done.
you actually can with the object, but you can also do it with knowing what your zoom is at. So you take a little bit of mathematics, but yeah, you can do that. The problem is there that you kind of added the whole curvature thing at the end. X-axis curvature should not be seen at ground
No, well,
level.
we
Yeah, it
we
should.
don't agree with that, but
Field of view. No, listen, that
Yes, it
field of
should.
view, have you done the math on that one?
Yes, we have. So if you go to QED, obviously and observably flat, Chris models out a sphere Earth with the exact dimensions and demonstrates unequivocally that you should see x-axis curvature. And do you know why, Tim? Because you're on a ball in your fantasy world, and that ball means that it's a ball in every direction. Every direction from your feet, it's ball.
Just a question. So how many pixels would you expect to see over water?
You can see it in the demonstration. Just check it out. QED, obviously and observably flat. There is a slight error about Ireland in there. We had to concede that.
Yeah.
Unlike the perspective thing that none of the ballers have conceded, Tim conceded on the last show that he
Can you
has
do
gone back to the
correctly?
original mathematics and just used them again. So I was going to get to that on the last show, but I didn't get a chance, Tim. So why
as well?
are you now a perspective denier, Tim? You said you went back to the maths and did apply it to Ranty's observation after finding out that it doesn't apply perspective. So are you a perspective denier now?
Can you share my screen? I just had this simple question here.
I just asked you a question, Tim. We've had a lot of questions, almost a whole
Here,
show with you and Ranty,
2
actually.
foot
So
underwater.
I don't mind. Just
2 foot
one question from me, I
underwater.
think, is pretty reasonable. No one's going to accuse me of interrupting, even though you're constantly interrupting me. So I've got one question. Are you now a perspective? You're talking constantly, Tim.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer your stupid fucking questions.
Oh,
Go
you're
fuck
getting
yourself.
annoyed and swearing. That's normally a good sign that someone's properly triggered, so I will ask it again. Are you a perspective denier, Tim?
Later.
Bye! I wouldn't want to answer that too if my perspective denying, proof of nothing, begging the question calculation for Earth curve had just been exposed as badly as it has. I'd bugger off at that point too. Thanks for staying though. Seems it was just as easy as asking if you denied perspective to get rid of him. Amazing.
so I want to put the onus back on Ranty just because it's your footage. Would you be willing to try to scale that and see, just unless Nathan, you're saying that
What do you mean scale it? I don't know what you mean by that.
well, if you know what's the object that you're showing us?
Oh,
Barrow?
right. Yeah, it's Barrow in Furnace.
Okay, so and I'm sorry, I don't know. Is it an island or is it just an offshoot of the land
right.
itself?
So you're all new to this. Would you like me to show you where I've taken the footage from, etc.?
No. I've watched the footage. I guess I'm just trying to refresh my memory in terms of, is it an island or is it just an offshoot of land?
Yeah, imagine it's like an offshoot of land, like you're looking across a cove, for instance,
Right.
and then
right.
you see Barrow in Furnace across the sea. Yeah.
Right. So I guess once you bring that into focus and you know how long that extension is from left to right, say it's 10 to 15, say it's 15 miles, that's the distance. So then when you scale back to the shoreline and that 15 miles is out there in the distance, you should then be able to scale from that perspective to the right all the way to the left and say we've got relatively 10 of those spots, so that's 1,500 miles worth of horizon that we're looking at. If that's 1,500 miles of horizon, it should be hugely curved.
Yeah, I did that with Mick West. Mick West propositioned, well, not propositioned, but set me a challenge to go up to Blackpool Tower with an iPhone, and you would easily see the horizon. Sorry, the curve on the x-axis. So I went up. I used the P900. I used it at no focal length at all. Snapped a series of images and worked out the distances. I think it's probably on my channel. I can't remember. I think it was maybe 24 miles of horizon that I'd calculated that I was actually seeing in this one particular image. and I ran a straight line completely across it, and it was flat as a pancake. And that was one of the videos that I did last year, sometime in around about June of last year.
Anybody mind if I just play a section of video?
Fire away.
It's just going to
Watch
draw a
out.
complete halt to the proceedings, which is why I asked permission. Let me know if you can all see. You all see that?
We can.
The composite images that Randy provided and superimposed them. And I went directly to Anthony's video and did the same thing and brought out panoramic images. So what you'll see in the background is this arc in the background. Each one of these represents one screen grab from the video going through this series all the way around to basically this point, which allowed me to determine basically how far the camera would swing through the arc during the video. So from point to point is the extent of the video footage that we had available for analysis. And when it gets interesting is when we do this. So right now the camera is, like I said, top dead center of the Earth sphere. I set it, in this case, I set it at 52 feet. So if I zoom into back to the camera here, you'll see that it's way put that to top here. Going over. This stuff is pretty small. But when it gets kind of interesting is the camera elevation where Anthony was standing is 52 feet above sea level. The lighthouse, its foundation begins at 84 feet, and then there's a foundation part, and then the lighthouse, and so forth, so that it ends up at about 100 and, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think there's something at the very top of it if you add it all up and compile it to its focal point. But that's the top of the lighthouse. So in essence, Anthony physically in St. Bees is standing physically below the lighthouse when he was looking across the water. So just keep that in mind because it'll be important here in a minute. So what I'm going to do now is zoom back out a little bit. I'm going to set the center reference point, cursor to selected, to the center of the Earth. I'll just zoom out real quick here and show you that it's down in the middle of the Earth. And the camera at the top is where it's supposed to be at 52 feet above sea level. I'm going to grab that camera and rotate it backwards. So it's going to move right now because it's actually physically in the Isle of Man, right? In the dirt underground. So I'm going to move it backwards to the point and maintain 52 feet above sea level until we get to St. Bees distance away from the target, which is the lighthouse. And that'll put it at 31.55 miles over the radius of these. So rotate on the x-axis and bring it backwards to, I'll get it as close as I can so you can see that it's 31.58 miles. Let's see. I want to be really precise. We can rotate it on the X. 31.5486, so 31.55 miles. That's close enough for me within an inch. So now this is where it gets fun. We can start doing the analysis of the picture and see where things are pointing and what we're looking at. I'll put the cursor to the camera. Let's see, cursor to the camera. I'm just going to scale that out so it's a little bigger. We can see it a little easier. We can tell which frame we're looking at in the background in the composite image. I'll temporarily hide the panoramic one here. This is the high resolution one.
We don't seem to have the panoramic on our image for some reason.
Nope.
The actual picture. Is that correct? Is that...
On the bottom here, I'm going to turn it on the bottom here.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So now, when I zoom in on the bottom frame here, you'll see that now we're starting. This is a panoramic one. So this one isn't the high contrast one quite yet. I'll show you that after. But this is just to show you that the camera's swinging through the frames. This is the Ottoman where it actually theoretically would be to proper elevation. I didn't show you that, but at this point here at the top of the Ottoman is 2,013 feet precisely, and this would be sea level. So this represents the bulge of 169 feet of water between Anthony, who is the camera, and the camera is now at negative 612 feet. So it's gone backwards and over the bulge in reverse to its point where it should be, and is looking back at the lighthouse, and is technically 612 feet below sea level. So it's trying to look up and over 169 feet of water, right, to try to maintain a target of the lighthouse. So really, in the image, when I turn off the Island Man model and zoom into the picture, because these are lined up, you'll see there is no lighthouse. It's physically impossible to see it because it's behind 169 feet of water over the bulge, and you're also 600 feet below sea level, technically on the other side, not below sea level, but over the arch, right? You've gone backwards over the arch. And so you have to make up for that. And the only way to do that is to basically turn off this giant wall of water to show that technically you're still looking at the lighthouse, which was filmed precisely right there. So there's the light that I showed you before. This is the lighthouse shining the light, and in the model, this is the lighthouse right where it's supposed to be, and we toggle it on and off so we can see that in the images that Ranty had composited, that little bit of pixel is what you're actually seeing of the lighthouse itself. It's where it's basically supposed to be at sea level.
Can you turn on the water while we've got it in near field?
Yeah, so there would be, this is the water, basically toggling the earth, curved water, on and off. Right, so that's how far beneath sea level or behind the curve you would really be to scale.
This is the closest observable landmark. This is Morgold Lighthouse, not
Right.
the lighthouse, just to be clear to the audience. Sorry, I should have done this at the beginning. So the lighthouse
Yes,
that
this
Ranty
is-
took you to was on the very furthest left tip at 51 miles. This is not. This is at 30, I've forgotten the exact figure.
31.55 miles. So this is the closest point, observable point of the lighthouse. Now, I'll show you on the map here. I'll turn on the man again so you'll see it appear in the top image. Or to start to see the water drop away from you, both left and right. I'll show you from the top down in the top part here. This is what would happen in reality on a spherical ball water surface with precision. Is when you're looking on 0 point towards the Isle of Man, you get a wall of water in front of you. And as you sweep left, you will see the water drop away from you because now you're on the spherical surface, standing still, looking, panning left and right. So now we're getting, when we're at 90 degrees to the left, you'll see now you're starting to see that this here is the, where's the horizon line? Basically, refracted drop. I put them all in here basically to their proper heights. This line represents, 349 feet of curvature. From this line to the water line is 349.41 feet of curvature. And then I can do the same and rotate it to the right-hand side. All the way around. We'll see it come back up to zero, basically the horizon. Rotate around to the right. So no matter which way you swing the camera,
Who's that?
it's constant because you're standing on the spherical surface, looking around and spinning your camera around in a circle. So in order to see targets,
I'm going to play that bit again.
0 point towards the other man, you get a wall of water in front of you.
This is
And as you
x-axis
sweep left,
curvature.
You will
So
see the water drop away from you, because now you're on the spherical surface, standing still, looking, panning left and right. So now we're getting, when we're at 90 degrees to the left, you'll see now you're starting to see that this here is the, where's the horizon line? Basically, refracted drop. I put them all in here basically to their proper heights. This line represents, 349 feet of curvature. From this line to the water line is 349.41 feet of curvature. And then I can do the same and rotate it to the right-hand side. All the way around. We'll see it come back up to 0, basically the horizon. Rotate around to the right. So no matter which way you swing the camera, it's constant, because you're standing on the spherical surface, looking around and spinning your camera around in a circle.
Only 1,100 feet tall. Would you be able to model that and show us whether that should be behind the curve or not, in terms of without any refraction whatsoever? Because basically, when you overlap, the figures overlap a little bit, and it creates confusion because there's a drop value which is greater than the mountain. So according to the drop value, when he's at the shoreline, it should be completely gone. But then the hidden value makes the drop value then added to the bulge confusing, and it makes it so that you can't really work out. If you're a retard, you can't work out whether you should see it or not.
Yes, you can. Easy.
So just give me a yes, no, Rumpus. Should Elsa Craig, that Al K did, should that be seen? Should any of that be seen from where he took the 38-mile observation from? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. So could we model that, Chris, and see is that statement true?
Chris
38 miles on a ball. Can we see some at 1,100 feet tall?
I'd just like to point out that thing that Chris just did, he assumed your height was 53 feet, and we know it was 115 feet, so it's completely invalidated what he just did completely.
Sorry,
How
what
do
I
you
was
know
showing,
these two?
Rumpus, was the x-axis curvature that apparently we've just been told by Tim Osman that we should never ever see, but we definitely should see, because according to you, we live on a sphere.
Just like to point out that he said verbally that he was putting in Anthony at 53 feet.
Sorry, you've just completely ignored me. We were addressing Tim Osman's point about x-axis curvature, and if you live on a sphere, you should have it.
I just want to register this point that he's put in Anthony at 53 feet, and he was at 115 feet. So he's just been modelling is completely wrong.
No, he wasn't.
Rumpus, the 115 feet was the absolute maximum, the absolute lowest tide of the low tides.
No, you were at near the peak of
let's
those
not
cliffs,
get onto this subject, right?
Tripod,
No.
Come on, Riley.
No.
You know
Rumpus,
you were actually in a
Rumpus,
balloon.
not interested.
Rumpus says it.
Not interested. Only interested in the perspective omission. Only interested in all of the stuff you've got wrong. Are you here to retract all of your errors?
No, of course. I've got it all right. I've got everything 100% right.
So have you accounted for perspective?
No, you got
Hold on. Let's get a straight answer.
So you think Ireland's still in there, do you?
Let's get a straight answer to our question. We've already conceded that, Rumpus. Shut your mouth. Shut up and listen. Have you accounted for perspective in any of the comparison images that you have done with your mathematics?
I tried to explain this a few days ago, but you didn't.
Yeah, and you were wrong.
No,
Rumpus,
right.
You were wrong.
I'm asking you a question.
You don't know what a triangle is, Arwen. You do not know what a triangle is, so you're not.
No, now you're obfuscating again. Right, can you all just stop talking to Rumpus for a second so he can clearly hear my question? Okay. Have you gone back and included the perspective that you have omitted to date?
That would be a very stupid thing to do.
Why? We all see perspective.
Yes, we do. But
Nathan,
you interrupted my answer.
We have Rumpus on the record saying that, yes, we should see some of Elsa Craig at 1,100 feet at 38 miles. Now, we also have Chris that is able to model this. Now, what we can do is we can get Chris to demonstrate it, and then we can get Rumpus to validate it, and then we'll see whether your 100% being correct claim is right.
I'm always 100% correct. I'm always correct. It's a fundamental internet constant that I'm always correct. and that Ranty and you
In
and
your
Nathan are
mind.
always wrong.
In your
It is
mind.
a fundamental truth of the internet that I'm
In your
always,
No
mind,
problem.
always
you
correct.
can never
Still
lose.
haven't got an
but in
answer
reality,
to my
I can't help
lose a
question.
lot.
Hold
I
on,
cannot help
guys.
myself from
Chris.
being right.
Chris,
Hold
would it be
on.
possible?
I'd
Could we
like
do this live on
Anthony.
the
I still
fly?
haven't got an answer to my question. So, have you gone back and included perspective where to date it was not? Because we do observe perspective, Rumpus.
Yes, we observe lots of things, but it's not appropriate for the calculations that we were doing in that thing. So
Yes,
no,
it was.
No, of
We were
course not.
comparing
Stupid.
visual photography with a calculation to describe what we
Ah,
should. And
that's
shut
something
up!
different. That's
Shut
something
your
different.
mouth, or I will kick. If you interrupt me again, Rumpus, I will just kick you out. Right? Simple. Listen to what I am saying. You have not included a very real viewing function. That would be perspective. Now, you're saying it's not needed. It is. Well, are you going to go back and readdress your exclusion of perspective or not?
That would be an error.
No, the error would be to exclude perspective.
No, because the calculations I give return absolute values.
Yes, well,
These
we don't see
include
things in
perspective.
absolute values, do we?
No, we don't.
We see things
don't,
in
but
relative
I'm not
values.
emulating a photograph. I'm not
Hi,
emulating.
Taylor. How you
I'm giving
doing?
absolute values for things.
Taylor?
Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, too late. Sorry, Taylor.
Oh,
We don't see
Taylor,
things in absolute values, Rumpus. We see
we
them
don't.
in relative.
Agreed.
Why
Absolutely
do you?
correct.
Right, you've just interrupted me again. This is your last warning. I am stating a fact. You
I'll
have just.
agree with you.
Right, that's it. You're out.
Okay.
Goodbye. We do not see things in absolute values. We see them in relative values. He is asserting that because his calculator only deals with relative values, that makes it correct. It doesn't. We unequivocally do observe perspective.
Yeah, what we do not observe is Rumpus actually making that video that he promised now almost 2 months ago.
Right, Ranty,
So-
is there any chance you
Yo.
can bring up your pictures of your telegraph poles?
Oh, right. Yeah, I suppose I could do.
Is Chris still here?
Chris was never here.
Oh, you were playing the video?
Yeah, I was just playing a chunk
Oh,
of
right, I didn't
video.
realise he
Oh,
I
look.
thought it was. I thought. Sorry, I thought. It was...
CGI.
No, not
Limitless
these. I
channel's
mean,
gonna love this.
you go
That was
ahead,
actually
Ranty.
a brilliant presentation. That's amazing. That's on Flat Earth QED.
Yeah.
Shout
was
out for getting
really-
that reference point, Nathan. That's incredible.
Say
That was
again.
really good.
There we go. There's your lampposts.
So this is
I feel
what
like
we
a dick.
observe. This is something the calculation does not account for, and Rumpus has just stated it doesn't need to. Well, this is what everyone observes every time they open their eyes. Everyone, every camera, every video recorder observes perspective. Without question, that's what we see. But Rumpus, he wants to argue and talk over us while he says that it's not necessary to account for this very real fact of life. So, Rumpus, yeah, you still need to retract your fallacious calculations that you have done because they don't match reality at all. You have used a calculation that is not designed for viewing functionality and then matched it with viewing functionality, i.e. photos. And that is absolutely incorrect. To come back on and say it's not needed because I don't want to observe reality, which is what this is, objects in the distance getting smaller, then you can deny reality. But that's what we're going to make clear to every member of the audience. You're a reality denier. You're a perspective denying reality denier. Yeah? Reality's a thing. I don't care if your calculator doesn't account for it. That doesn't make it right to ignore it.
Nathan,
What?
it's called a stadiometric measurement.
I don't care what it's called. It's called perspective and you don't account for it.
Can I just say, I was I was almost tempted then to do a little presentation against those Berks in chat, but I already did it this morning on my channel because you saw it, didn't you, Nathan? So if anyone wants to head on over there and debate what actually they were viewing about my observations, then they can see it on a hangout that I did this morning over at my channel, Ranty Flat Earth, and you can see it's about an hour long. It's an hour long of fun ripping those Berks to shreds.
Let's take a straw poll of how stupid our audience is. The Globers particularly. Who in the audience feels it is not necessary to account for perspective? Who thinks that?
Me.
Type 1 if you think it is not necessary to account for perspective. Something that we all observe every day, every time we open our eyes. Type 2 if you think you do need to account for this very real fact of life. Alan, you're on the panel. You don't think it's necessary to account for something that we see every time we use a camera.
No, not at all.
Why would that be?
I've been through this.
Sorry, that's not an answer. Why do you feel it is not necessary to account for something that every man, woman and child, camera and camcorder has ever been used accounts for? Why would we ignore this?
Silence.
All right, I don't mind how long this silence lasts, Ranty.
I do, it gets boring.
Can we assume from that very protracted silence that you don't have a reason why we should ignore perspective, Alan? Even though you very clearly put number 1 in the chat, like it was reasonable to ignore this fact of life?
Not required.
Sorry, perspective is not a requirement, it's a fact of life. It's not like we have a choice whether or not we include things getting smaller at distance, you idiot. Do you think we have a choice? Let's rephrase that for Alan. Do you think we can choose whether or not we account for perspective? Do you think that's a choice, Alan?
You don't need it on the calculators.
No, you don't. But then they don't match reality, do they?
Don't know. Do they, Jeremy?
No, they don't match reality then, do they, Alan?
I like that voice.
So, Alan, do you still feel it's just perfectly acceptable to ignore perspective and say, well, that we have no proof of, I accept that, that's fine. But perspective that I see every time I open my bloody eyes, I'll ignore that, that's fine. Because, your reason, the calculator doesn't have it in. So it's fine to ignore it.
Calculator doesn't require it, I've told you.
No,
this
I didn't say the calculator required. I said, is it necessary to account for it? Not does your calculator include it? Try to listen carefully. Is it necessary to account for the very real fact of life that every man, woman, child, camera and camcorder captures every time they are used, Alan? Is that necessary to account for? Not does your broken perspective denying, proof of nothing begging the question calculator include perspective, because we all know it doesn't. So do you think it's necessary to account for perspective, the thing we all observe, Alan?
Well, unless you're a sniper or a...
So only snipers deal with perspective, do they?
Yes.
Only snipers. Everyone else is walking into walls.
Yes, well, that's where they
This is
stayed in
really the retarded response I'm going to get when I ask it's only snipers that deal
Nathan,
with perspective.
No, I said snipers use it, surveyors
Yeah,
use it.
everybody uses it. Not just everybody. Any video capture device ever created in mankind's history uses perspective and accounts for it and captures it. Yet you think, because you're begging the question calculator doesn't, that it's fine to ignore it. Let's all ignore perspective. Forget this. Let's just label you.
Hey, Nathan,
You're a
look at that
perspective
picture.
denier.
Why
It's all
don't
right.
you come up with a
Tim Osmond
calculator
didn't answer because he
and
quit
apply
before we got
perspective
to
the
this
sun?
point.
Nathan, why don't you apply perspective?
You're a perspective
to the sun?
denier, Alan.
Because the sun is not on the earth and
You
we
are a
have no
perspective
proof it's
denier.
a physical object.
Can you display me a second,
No, don't.
Nathan?
Apply it to the sun.
No,
What does
we
that
have
mean?
no proof of any distance or size. It's
We don't need to. It
useless.
doesn't change
Yeah,
size.
you do. You absolutely
Why
do.
does it not change size?
This is just an obfuscation.
We don't know.
No.
The question was, why is it not necessary to account for perspective something that every man, woman, child, camera and camcorder takes into effect every time it is used. And now Alan's on to the sun because he doesn't have an answer. His only response was to say, the calculator that begs the question assumes R, predicts its own outcome. Yeah? That calculator and the R value, they're good, man. They're cool. Doesn't matter that it's just an assumption. It doesn't matter that it's not backed by science. It doesn't matter that the calculation itself includes the outcome. That's all good by Alan. But perspective, no, we can ignore that. That's not necessary. Why? Well, because the calculator hasn't got it. So we can just ignore that fact and then assert that snipers use it, maybe. Don't know about other people. I don't know if I include perspective in my life. Do you not have perspective in your life, Alan?
There's just the 2 cases that I know of.
You don't use perspective in your life then, Alan? You're the exception, are you?
Are you blind, Alan?
Do you have
Because
eyeballs?
if you're blind, you're not going to need perspective.
Are you questioning my Z depth there, Alwyn?
Yes, we're asking you if you have depth perception and vision. Take your time. It's not that difficult a question. Do you have the capability to view things? But you take your time, Alan.
I just want to play a video, Nath. It's not going to. There's no music on it. It's just from P900's Sandra, who did a video from Blackpool. Just put it on in the background if you.
Yeah, just let it roll, man. You're on.
Yeah, she gave me permission to play it. It's just showing how close the wind turbines appear to be going over the horizon. I just thought I'd show it that, seeing as some people don't believe that this is an actual phenomenon that does apparently happen. I suppose this is CGI too, is it?
But, yeah, before we get into that, we'll keep Alan to the ropes. So we still haven't got a reasonable.
No, hang on. Why is this setting from the bottom upwards?
Alan, we still haven't got a reasonable answer to why it's acceptable to deny perspective.
Why is that setting from the bottom upwards?
Let's just get to a reasonable answer about why it's acceptable to deny perspective.
Why is that setting from the bottom?
Why is it acceptable to deny perspective, Alan? Just not having it in the calculator is not an acceptable answer for me. So moving on is not going to happen.
That's good footage.
Shh. Why won't you answer this question? Is it because you're a perspective-denying globehead who would rather assert your religious belief than actually admit that you deny a very real fact of life? Something that every man, woman and child, camera and camcorder takes into effect every time they're used. You'd rather deny that, would you, in favour of your religious belief in a globe Earth?
Arwen is picking on me.
Yeah, I am picking on you. I'm asking you very directly why it is acceptable to deny perspective simply because your calculator doesn't include it.
Why is that setting from the bottom upwards?
Yeah, you're still not answering me. We are not moving on from this point, Alan.
Great footage, that, Auntie.
Yeah, it includes perspective. Why is it acceptable to deny the perspective in your world of sphericity and R values that you don't have any scientific evidence for? Why is it acceptable to accept an R value with absolutely no backing whatsoever, yet something that you know because you can stick your hand in your face, in front of your face, and move it further away and see it get smaller? You would deny that in favour of a religious assertion. Why is that?
I'm not answering you until you answer me.
You've got nothing on me. You don't seem to get it. These globeheads do the same thing to me. Mick, yeah, he started laying down some assertions. Then I bitch slapped that little twat and pointed out that you have got nothing on me, dickhead. Then he came in anyway, having had zero of his demands met. He still came in, yeah? Like a bitch. That's what he did. That's what I'm treating all you globehead religious zealots like. Little bitches. Because that's what you are. Bitches to your religion. That's all you are. You've got a religious belief. Hey, Jay.
Awesome.
So, when are we going to get an answer for why it's acceptable to deny perspective, Alan?
When you answer my question. Great footage proving the globe Earth there, Auntie.
How is it proving the globe Earth? What are you talking about? What, with you begging the question presuppositional value of R that you insert into the mathematics that no longer work? Because we busted them, because they don't include perspective. Is that how it proves the globe, Alan? Because that would mean that you need to explain why the mathematics used in that model, the standard model, the model that instead of falling on his own sword and just saying his calculator was broke, Mick West decided to bring down the whole house. Tell everybody that it's the standard model at fault. So,
How do you account for the sun setting with your version of
we're
perspective?
not moving on. We're waiting for your answer
Are
to
we?
why it's
Are we?
acceptable to deny the very real reality of perspective, just because it's not in your begging the question, proof of nothing, fallacious, presupposing, perspective denying calculation that you think proves something. Just because that calculation for the standard model of Earth denies perspective, why do you think it is acceptable to deny perspective personally?
Answer my question then.
You've got nothing on me. I've just explained this. Like Gem Panda, where you can come to my shit show, he says, when no one will watch you or hear you, so you can challenge my absolute outrageous assertions using a broken, begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective denying Earth curve calculation. Why is it that he thinks somehow he's going to entice me onto his show to challenge him about his errors? Yeah, that ain't going to happen. Yeah? I've got an audience already, and I can say Gem Panda is a coward because he won't address his errors. Yeah? The errors that we had to address, we addressed, cap in hand. Yeah? When we make mistakes, we address them with our faces on camera. 99% of the time with people publishing our address in our own chat. We deal with wankers like you daily, Alan. Faceless potatoes who come on and assert to an audience of nearly a couple of hundred people that it's acceptable to deny perspective. And it's not.
How does that sunset with your version?
You just keep obfuscating it. It's humiliating for anyone watching that you can't even answer the question. You think it's acceptable to deny perspective? You're an idiot.
Yeah.
You Dougal off Father Ted, Alan. You literally Dougal. Not understanding about the small cow, toy cow, and real cow example.
He's not going to admit it, Nathan. You got him, okay? He's not going to admit it. He's not going to answer the question. So
That's
either
all right.
kick him or just let's move on because, he's not going to answer the question. He probably doesn't even get it.
Yeah, I don't mind. Perspective denying idiot. He can deny it for 10 or 15 minutes with me holding him to the fire, and he's got no answer. There was at least 25 second pause when I asked him for his explanation for why it's acceptable to deny perspective. And deny perspective, you all do, globeheads. Every last one of you, Rumpus included. He can come on and pretend like it's not an issue and that it's acceptable because his calculator doesn't do it. But these are the facts of the matter here. Globeheads who use their calculations and standard models to prove we're on a globe by inserting the R value and presupposing we're on a curve, Earth. Yeah, that calculation doesn't include perspective. That's how they've managed to hijack your illusions of what you think the world is and insert curvature where there is none. It's just perspective. Anyway, my rant is over.
It's not just perspective. There's also still the optical slant to answer Alan's last desperate question. There's the optical slant, and that just makes it look like there is a point where there is curvature, but in reality, it's not really curvature, because from that optical effect that is a slant, from that point on, it just goes on in a straight line, and it doesn't exponentially fall down, as would be absolutely necessary for a curvature. It would fall out of sight completely, relatively quickly, especially because of perspective, which simultaneously, as the curvature, the bulge in between the thing that you're looking at and you, the observer, gets bigger, at the same time, the far distance makes the object you're looking at smaller due to perspective. So at some point, you should just not ever be able to see anything, not even a part of it, because it would be completely concealed behind the bulge. Yet, we do see the optical slant effect, but beyond that, lots of things are still visible because it's not a curve, it's a slant with a straight line of sight from there on. That was it.
Is Anthony still there?
Alex Quant says, Nathan will ask us for the formula for something that isn't required. All hail Nathan. I'm not asking for anything. I'm saying that you've made mistakes, that your perspective denying, proof of nothing, begging the question Earth curve calculator does not include perspective, and yet it has been used to compare two pictures. Even though it doesn't compare to viewing functionality, it's not designed for viewing functionality, it doesn't account for apparent sizes of things, it only takes into account actual sizes, which means they ignore perspective and have plenty of room to convince people who are more than willing to accept an assumed value of R that presupposes its outcome in the mathematics as some sort of acceptable thing to ignore. Like, yeah, well, technically speaking, this thing in front of my face doesn't change size if I move it 30 miles away. Basically, it's the same size. Same actual size, right? Well, no, it's absolutely tiny now. Yeah, but if you were to go right up to it again and run a tape measure down it, it's like, so what? That's not what we observe. Things get smaller into the distance. What's that you say? That's curvature? Well, what about the perspective that does the same thing? Oh, we'll just ignore that. It's not in our maths. What? This is insane.
Yeah, I'm just going to show those lampposts again, because we know that these lampposts are about 60 or 70 meters apart, right? So by the time that you get to the last one, we're about a mile down the road. So what's the curve calcs on 1 mile? 8 inch. So essentially they're saying that this lamppost, if you was taking this as a still image, right, which looks like it's lost 2/3 of its height, this last one, essentially it's gone over 8 inches of curve, right? But we know it's the same height as this, but we know that's not possible, because perspectively it looks 1/3 the height of this one.
Ranty.
So do you take it from the height of the lamppost or the apparent height at distance? Perspective.
What you see is what you get. What we get is this lamppost here is bigger than this lamppost here. Now, you can tell me all day long that they're the same size, and I'll say, yeah, their actual size is the same, but what we are doing is calculating how much of this we should see. And yeah, your calculator says it's still this big, but it's dropped by 8 inches because it's a mile away. Oh, right.
Yep.
What about the fact that it's got much smaller because of its angular size at distance? Oh, well, our calculator doesn't include that. Well, but reality includes it. Yeah, but only for snipers. Really? Is that the best you've got? Well, what about the sun? And so it goes on.
Well, this is the concluding point that what's his name, M. Scott Veach was basically arguing that when you put your height of your target in the lamppost, let's just say the lamppost is 100 feet for example. He says you put your lamppost in at 100 feet at the distance, but because he wants to view it locally, he thinks that's basically he thinks that's okay. And I'm like, no, go back to the eyes of the observer, then look at your 100-foot lamppost. It's tiny. So basically, what we need to do is get the ballers to show how on their model, show how it falls behind the curve, and then you remove the curve element out of it and show it on a flat plane, because that's the only difference. And let's show us the difference. And then when we'll get Chris Monk to model it, let's do it with Elsa Craig, because it's a 38-mile observation and it's 1,100 feet. It's almost 1,000 feet. It's nice numbers for people to get their head round. So why don't can any of the ballers model Elsa Craig 38 miles, 1,100 feet? Rumpus claims that some of it should be
39 miles.
39 miles. Rumpus claims that we should see some of it, right? I don't think we should see any of it, because the drop value is greater than the height of the mountain, and that alone is an issue because he was so close to the water. There's also a bulge in front of you, and I want to test Rumpus's claim that he's 100% right all of the time, because we know he's not. Basically, he's 100% wrong all of the time, because
that's
he's
wrong. Because what's the height of Elsa Craig? 1,100 feet. What's the drop value?
I think it's 1279. Let me just do the maths and I'll hang on.
From its relative position, straight up from its position.
Distance in miles is 39, and the viewer height was 3 feet, was it?
No, forget. Yeah, well, it doesn't really matter about that. We're talking about the drop, the physical drop.
Well, the drop is there's 1,014 feet of drop at 39 miles.
Right, so he's right. Then you should see some of it, because if it's
no, but there's a bulge of 253 feet halfway between you and it, right? According to their orthographic drawing, and that bulge is half the distance, so it's effectively 500 feet relative to the target that you're looking at. Shouldn't see any of it.
Yeah, you've
But
got to take
there's
into
a problem,
account,
though,
this
'cause
is
the
something that
horizon
Alvin's
is
been
only meant
pointing
to
out,
be
which is
2
that the
points.
perspective also affects the bulge. It doesn't just
does.
affect the target in the
Makes it
distance.
relative to the drop and the thing in the background, it's effectively double because it's half the distance away.
Right. So you going now, when Ranty goes down 3 inches, if we were on a sphere, that would have an absolutely enormous effect on the perspective of that bulge just by dropping a few inches. Do we see any difference? Oh, well, we see it a bit clearer. Well, what about anything obscuring it? No, nothing changes in that regard. It just still looks flat as a pancake and there's no x-axis curvature, which we should see. Right, so there's no curve. We're not seeing any obstruction. We're seeing shore to shore. There's nothing obstructing it, yet you can go up higher, you can go lower. It's not like this massive bulge suddenly has this perspective affecting it. It's not there.
I'm just going to check that Elsa Craig distance because I'm sure when I did that Google thing, when I did the distance, I got the drop value was greater than the height of Elsa Craig. But when I did it, then it seems not to be.
What does that mean? Nathan Oakley, when will you move your English ass around the world? No idea what that means.
I think
Mr.
he's saying
Michael
around the
MW,
sphere
no idea what you're
world.
talking about. Sorry.
Let me know if I'm displaying, Nate.
Yeah, you are on.
So over a year ago, I did this video. It was Mick West made a challenge. I took him up on it. I had to re-upload it on this channel because I lost my other channel. And essentially, this was trying to find curve on the x-axis, which he said would be we'd be able to do if we went and took an image from Blackpool Tower. So that's exactly what I did. I went up to Blackpool Tower. I triangulated my position. I realised that this area on the right here is actually part of Barrowing Furnace. So I blocked that out. Didn't need it because it would have given a fake reading. I then measured from left to right, knowing the distance to the horizon and the actual amount of arc that I was seeing, and it was 21 miles. And then I put the line in, like so, proving that this is essentially flat as a pancake. There is no curve on the x-axis. Now, this was the challenge that Mick West said that I should do. And I put his little head on a little spike, and I run it through the image, and you can see that there is no curve at all from the horizon to that red line. Yeah, Mick West. I think this is why Isa did the video.
He tried his
the
best.
song, yeah, because we were really on his case this time last year, weren't we, Anthony? And especially when he made this challenge to go up to Blackpool Tower and see the curve with guys. An iPhone would do it, he said. Well, went up, found the 21 miles of horizon, and there isn't a single pixel of curve. Anyway,
Very cool.
so that was the video that I did last year, and then obviously I changed the contrasts and stuff so that you can actually see the horizon again much sharper, and you can actually just follow the same thing. I do the same thing with it. There's no curve. There's no change.
Pixels of curvature.
Nothing at all. Well done, Mick West. You tried your best. So,
You failed the test.
but you failed the test. That was my video from Mick West last year.
Hi, Adam. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad, guys. Not bad. Sorry, I'm gardening again, but Anthony got me interested. What are those numbers again, guys? Just
which numbers? That's why I got you to
9
join.
miles, 1,000 feet, and at what distance is the alleged hump?
Well, I think I've just got rid of it. Hang on.
You're looking for Alk stats, basically, aren't you?
Yeah, it's 1,100 feet. The mountain is 1,100 feet. Distance of 39.06 miles. Viewer height, whatever, 12 million feet if you rumpus, but I think it was about 3 feet max. The drop value is 1017, but the hidden value is 954. So the drop value is just 90 feet short of the total height of the mountain. However, there's a bulge of 254 feet between you and the observer, and because that's half the distance away, it's going to appear double the size that it should, say on there, because of perspective.
So the bulge is at what distance?
It does. Well, it says on the picture underneath. It doesn't give you the distance of the bulge.
Yeah, it does.
But the bulge is the
Yeah, it
halfway
does.
point according to
Yeah,
the
it does.
picture.
Yeah, it does.
However,
Distance
the
to
horizon,
horizon. Distance to horizon. That's what they
No.
call the bulge.
the bulge is on the picture, orthographic picture underneath, not perspective picture, the orthographic. The bulge is positioned at halfway between the observer and the target.
No, but that's just
Yeah,
a
it should
picture
always
bit.
Yeah,
For
ignore that.
mathematically, the horizon is the peak of the bulge, isn't
Right,
it?
distance to
Well, no,
horizon's the
not
value you
according to
need.
the orthographic drawing. If you stretch out and shrink,
Forget the drawing, Anthony. Anthony, just give us the distance to horizon.
Oh, hang on, I want to show you the problem. I want to show you why it's a bit of an issue.
Well, give me the number, and then I can just.
Can you just tell us what the number is?
The number to the horizon is 1.7 miles.
What elevation did you give him? Did you give him 3 feet?
That was on 2. So if you do it on
Yeah,
3,
3 feet. Yeah, I would say 1 foot because he actually states in his video that he tries to replicate.
yeah,
the
he's
1 foot
crouched down on his
observation.
knees, isn't he?
Yeah.
And Rumpus says it's 3, but I
No.
think 2. I mean, I think it's probably 1, but I think 2 is
I
compromised.
think it's 1. I've seen plenty of footage from the same position.
But
So I know
I'll
it's
go with
about
2.
1.
Rumpus
All
is
right.
exaggerating. We're exaggerating. Let's go in the middle because it seems reasonable. He was crouched down, his knees were touching the floor, and he was resting on his thigh. So, I mean, it's not that high. But anyway, in any event, the horizon is at 2 feet. It's 1.73 miles away, according to that. However, the bulge is 150 feet. And according to the diagram underneath, if you were to scale the where the horizon should be, it doesn't do it. There's no interaction with it. It's completely fallacious. But that bulge figure relative to the target that you're looking at effectively is double because it's that far. It's halfway, right? So Rumpus claims he's 100% right 100% of the time. Never takes into consideration perspective because he claims you don't need to. It's not trying to tell you a perspective view, which is actually true, but you do need to take into account perspective. But the bulge, I'm not sure that they've taken into consideration this bulge and the relative effect of it because it's all relative because of perspective. So I think it's effectively double. Relatively speaking, it's double the height that it actually tells us.
Nate, can you share my screen for just 1 second? Just a little bit longer. I want to show this. This was the cap that he put on top of the mountain and said that this was this little tiny portion at the top of the mountain. But as you can see, we have very clear, distinctive marks here that match up, that match up here, that match up here. They're all displaying characteristics at least down to this point here. Obviously, we know that this is compressed at the bottom because that's what happens. The nearer things get to the horizon from distance, they do get compressed and flattened out. But even based on this basic image here, we're seeing down to at the least 400 feet, if not under. And they say the curve, if you lived on a ball, should be 1,000 feet, wasn't it? So we're seeing down to at least 400 feet just from this rudimentary, and
obviously
matching up.
In the foreground are greater than waves appear bigger than the things in the background because of perspective.
And also, he got down to 1 foot. This lighter image here, which is the furthest observation, this was from 1 foot at 39 miles. He's looking over the water that was essentially flopping up and down, moving at 4 or 5 inches at this distance. And you can see it in here. And obviously, we're going to get some distortion at the bottom, but things we can actually map out on this image are this notch here, which is evident here, this notch here, which is evident here, and this flat part at the top, which is very consistent. And when you work it all down, and we've scaled it out to the widths and such, we're seeing down to at least 400 feet. And I would say we're seeing all of it. It's just compressed at the bottom. So when he put that little cap on the top, what's that guy called? That Burke that did a video.
No Simon Dan.
No Simon Dan. He basically put it right at the very top and said that this light grey bit was just this top part here. Utter horse manure. This is much more what we actually saw from that sort of distance, from 1 foot, bearing in mind. So you're not going to see, all the bottom stuff is going to be distorted. 1 foot, it's a crazy distance.
And just adding to that, when before Rumpus got kicked, his position was, I just want to say that Chris Monk showed Riley at whatever height he said he was at. Well, we've showed that the observer height makes no difference because we can see the same land when we lay on the beach, right? So the observer height is not relevant. We've demonstrated that. The observer height does not matter. What matters is how big are the waves in the foreground.
Yeah, exactly. So those small waves in the foreground are going to probably blot out 100, 200, 300, 400 feet of mountain in the distance, depending on how close they are to the camera. And obviously, the lower down you get, you know, over that sort of distance, 39 miles, that's a long, long way to not get a single wave that's higher than 1 foot. Let's face it, because if you've got a wave that's higher than 1 foot over a distance of 39 miles, you are going to receive obstruction of the thing you're trying to view.
Anybody want to summarise about the perspective problem that we've got, or the globers have got, I
Yeah.
should say?
I just wanted to just basically finish on what's his face, M. Scott Veitch's point. M. Scott Veitch claims that when you put your target in at 1,000 feet at the 30-mile distance, you do it locally. He doesn't think that you should put it in from the eyes of the observer from 30 miles away. He wants you to do it locally at 1,000 feet. And the only time that mountain is at 1,000 feet when it's touching your nose. All of the times it gets smaller and smaller and smaller the further away it gets from you. So you can't put it in at 100 locally at 1,000 feet.
Right, so you've said it 4 times now. What does do it locally mean?
He wants to do it. He wants to take it away from the eyes of the observer, and immediately does that. When he does that, that means he's removing perspective from the equation, and he
so
wants to
do it
He
locally.
wants to zoom in.
What you mean by do it locally is deny perspective.
He wants to. Yeah, he needs to negate perspective by taking your eyeballs out of the equation and putting it in from the third-party perspective, locally.
I see.
Nathan.
Yes.
So I've done a little bit of maths there, and there's obviously a disagreement as to where this bulge is occurring. And like Anthony's saying, at halfway point, so what was that, 19.5 miles, the bulge is equivalent using angular size calculations. It would then represent equivalently in the distance at the mountain as blocking off the bottom 508 feet. If you, like you were saying, I think I kind of agree in it. For me, the horizon has to be the top of the bulge.
Yeah, I agree. I was only contrasting with saying that that's not what it shows on Metabunk.
Yeah. If we take that, that's 1.7 miles, which is 9,000 odd feet. That creates a ratio of 5.2 to 1. So it means that the bulge would create an equivalent obstruction at something 39 miles away of 5,725 feet.
That's my point on perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, this is why they want to ignore perspective. So M. Scott Veitch wants to do it locally / deny perspective because they're screwed. It all goes very horribly wrong for the globe heads who deny science, beg the question, assume an R value, and deny perspective. It all goes bad when they include perspective.
And just before you round out, Nate, just share my screen, please, if you would.
Yeah, sure.
Are we on?
Go ahead.
Are we on?
Yeah.
So just so I'm clear, so that everyone's clear with my position, I agree with Adam. The bulge is the horizon. But if you look at what I was saying before, if you see here in the middle, it says that the bulge is halfway between you and the object. And if you make and this is it's confirmed by when you stretch it out, the bulge moves relative to the drop, and it's 50% of the distance. But the horizon doesn't move with it. Now I agree with Adam. The horizon should be the bulge. So whatever value the horizon is, it has to match the bulge. So if you were to put the horizon at the bulge in this instance, then obviously look at the ratio of how much things are affected. But because on the maths on this Elsa Craig thing, it says the horizon is only 1.37 miles of 31 miles. Well, I mean, what's that as a percentage? So let's just consider putting where the actual bulge is relative to, I mean, I'd have to try and put the horizon as a percentage, like kind of a fraction of the distance away from kind of like there kind of thing. So
The
it seems to be-
horizon's derived from viewer height, isn't it? So
their horizon is derived from viewer height. Oh yeah, so maybe that's all right. So I would have to be there. That's exactly what the position. Well, the thing is, it conflicts because on the one hand it says the horizon's 1.73 miles, but it says that the bulge is 160 feet. Well, on such a long distance, however you scale this, the horizon, to get the horizon at that's that very, very thing, you'd have to be really, 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 really low, which is what we are. But then the bulge falls behind. The bulge is here, and you would never see the bulge. So it seems to conflict. The two instructions seem to conflict, or maybe I'm reading it wrong. I don't know.
No.
But that value there appears to conflict with that value there, because the horizon, when it's so close to you, you can't see the bulge, but there should be a bulge in the way. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right. I'm just going to play one other thing before we round out. There is another YouTuber I'm going to give a shout out to who actually did this in presentation form. In other words, they didn't just explain it to me verbally or send me an email. They actually went to the extent of making a video to explain their point. If I can just find it, bear with me.
Free Tommy Robinson.
Okay, can you guys see that?
We can.
Hello world. Another bit of donkey science for the Earth curve calculators. I couldn't find this one anywhere on YouTube. I'm sure it's been mentioned before, but I couldn't find it, so I thought I'd do my own junkyard demo. As we can see here, we have tilt, and when we're doing our calculations, the thing we're observing might be a mountain, say 1,000 feet, but we don't take into account the reduction in size, in height rather, due to the tilt. So this is what we calculate, but that's not reality. And actually, what we need to calculate at this point is this. So here from the other angle, this is from the perspective, and here we see that perspective reduction that Nathan, Anthony and Ranty have been discussing. And as we go further away, the height will also be reduced due to the tilt. And we're not seeing that in the Earth curve calculators. So here, that's the actual, and here, I'm tilting it forward towards us. So we're gaining height by tilting it up, by actually looking at the height. But the reality is there. This is the actual height. Now, obviously this is exaggerated, but a plasterboard. But yeah, why is this not part of the Earth curve calculator?
Good point.
Yeah, I think it is a good point.
I did that on a whiteboard, though, from an orthographic point of view.
Do you know what's really good? Regardless of what's right, wrong, and who's right and who's wrong, people are now looking at the Metabunk calculator critically, and people are not actually looking at it and going, "No, it's right because Mick says so." And that's really what has to happen. We have to challenge it. And if it's wrong, if we've got it wrong, and it turns out that Nathan and I have made a mistake, we'll be the first ones to say we got it wrong, and we'll concede, because it's not a problem for us. There's no pride in this for us at all. If it's wrong, it's wrong. It's wrong, right? That's all it is. But it doesn't appear to account for perspective, and it needs to.
No, it doesn't. I keep saying this to you, Anthony. I'm sure Anthony said this on the show a few times. We have our fallings out. One of the things I get very annoyed with off air is begging the question for them. You know, bringing up the calculator and saying, "Well, you guys say this, that, and the other should do this, that, and the other." It's like, well, I don't say that. I'm a flat earther. This are nonsense. It's all rubbish to me. If they want to come in and beg the question, let them. But in this regard, you know, I don't know, Anthony.
Well,
where was that video from, Nathan?
Sorry, I should have credited the YouTuber. Thank you very much for reminding me to do exactly that. So, Belief is a Thief, hyphenated. So I'll read it out as it's spelt as a YouTube channel. Belief -space is space a -thief. There you go. Subscribe. I'll make sure I put a link to his video in the info box below this video.
So and a link to my channel as well.
Was the point he was making
Sanders.
take into account the tilt? That also reduces the height of the peak as well. Is that what we were saying?
Correct. It
If you,
reduces the angular size.
Yeah, it's the angle as you if you follow it like polygons for each kilometer you travel on the ball, you also tilt away at an angle of 0.0009 degrees. So, but that effect is cumulative. So as you see, as he goes further down away from the board, it really does start. Again, it's all maths. It's exponential in the way the curve happens. So that's a really, really good demonstration. As someone just said, the way I was always drawing it as a side view, and it really does dilute the effect when you draw it as a picture. But you see it from that perspective view, really do see the impact of those. And they're more pronounced angles, but you do see it a lot better from the effect from the perspective view.
Essentially, heights should
drop.
Well, no, if you've got whatever the drop is, let's say the drop was 1,000 feet, right? And then you take perspective into account. The physical drop of the top of that should be more than the drop height because of its angular size change. So if it's a 1,000-foot drop, it essentially is like 1,050-foot drop. If it was a 60-foot high building, it would be 1,060 or 1,050.
No, the point I think is if you go that distance and multiply the angle and say it's 2 degrees, whatever it is, and you've then got that angular size reduction, the drop from the curvature. But then what you've also got to do is tilt that height backwards a further 2 degrees so that it's in line with the center of the Earth still. Otherwise, it's out of line with local gravity. It's still in line with the observer's gravity. So you have to then, and in tilting it back 2 degrees, you also slightly reduce the height of the object a little further, because the pen's straight up, it's high. When it tilts back a bit, it's a little bit lower.
Correct. I mean, I think just to almost preempt what I think they would say to get around that, having seen them do this in Steve's Hangout, is they would use an arc calculation and account or cry refraction to get around that. Would you not think that would that nonsense refraction with an arc calculation applied, would that negate the tilt or not?
No, because we're talking about, in reality, a real change in the actual position, as opposed. It's another thing that the maths probably doesn't take into account.
Well, it was shown though. Sorry to talk over you. I just want to get this in. It was shown. So Chris Monk. That's why I played the beginning 10 minutes. That and I needed to find the exact spot where my point was being made about x-axis curvature. But he shows that when he repositions himself on the model, the sphere, he moves himself back. In other words, he tilts Anthony with his camera backwards. Well, it's the same principle. It doesn't matter if you tilt the observer backwards or the observation forwards. It's tilting.
Am I displaying, Nathan?
You can be.
Are we offline?
No, we're not offline.
Oh, right, okay.
I should have rounded the show out 10 minutes ago, but the conversation got good, and now I split the shows up. I can run them a bit longer if I want to. But the conversation's good. I'll carry on going till it gets boring.
So if we were on a ball, right, and this is without the ball. This is just a straight line, and we're on a ball, and then we put the ball in on top of the angular size change, right? So not only would these be getting smaller in height, respectively due to perspective, but they would also be dropping too,
and tilting back.
Which means that it would have to be greater than the drop value.
Yeah, we've got a lot of problems.
It would have to be.
Yeah, pointing out a lot of problems that they've got to cope with, because I'm not going to stop banging this drum. I don't care that Rumpus has come in today and caused a tiny bit of disruption by basically denying that it's necessary to include perspective. But then Alan was still around to give an answer, and he doesn't have one. The only answer that they've got, M. Scott Veach, son of an astronaut, is also backing this. We want to remove perspective from this equation, okay? It's not needed, right? Yeah. That's what they're basically saying. And
yeah,
no.
and the other thing is, this is what. Tell me how stupid this is, right? This to me is proof that he understands the position, but he pushes it anyway, knowing that it's wrong. But he knows the position, right? He claims that when you put the observer back to the eyeballs of the observer rather than viewing it locally at 1,000 feet, he claims that you're counting for perspective twice.
Can I just?
not
I know I'm
counting for
jumping in, but the
perspective
Rumpus
at all.
has just said, "Oh, in that photo, there would be a drop of a hole 3 to 4 inches, right?" So he gets it immediately. Yeah, that's right. A 3 to 4 inch drop over that half a mile distance that I've just showed. But when we're talking about a 20-mile difference, the drop would be a lot more, and then you'd have to include the angular size on top of that, which would mean that the drop value, everything that we see, has to be greater than the drop value.
Yeah. So what he's doing is obfuscating the scale point to make it sound like you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but
which
he's
is the same
essentially
thing that M.
admitted.
Scott Veach did with me.
Yeah, but he essentially admitted that I was correct then.
Yeah.
That it would have to be greater than the drop value.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
He
just don't want to
understands
include it.
but he pushes it anyway.
Yeah, they're saying
Same
we
with M.
want to.
Scott
I
Veach.
don't know who's come up with this locally. What the hell does locally mean?
This is M. Scott Veach. What he wants you to do is take your eyes from the observer, because what he said was, if you draw your line in for the hidden and it goes from the observer, once you've got that, that's fixed. And I agree. Once that's in, that's fixed. But what he then wants to do is move away from the observer's eyes and zoom in locally, and then put your mountain in at 1,000 feet locally. I'm like, no,
Oh,
that's
you
not how
just
we
mean
see
he
it,
wants
is
to
it?
do it
Go
inside
back to the
elevation?
eyes.
Sorry, just to get it clear, because Rumpus called me on it when we called it all orthographic view. This locally nonsense, he just wants to view it inside elevation, basically, then.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Side elevation's the word you need, M. Scott Veach. Side elevation. Locally, that doesn't really mean... It's very vague, very weaselly.
It's not
yeah?
even side elevation.
Side
It's
elevation,
orthographic.
so you remove perspective. So
Yeah.
you deny reality. Locally, meaning perspective denial.
Now, let me just clarify for Ben Delight, who
Why
obviously
would it be that
doesn't
an
understand.
astronaut's son doesn't want to account for perspective? Why would that be?
He mustn't account for perspective, Nathan, because if he does, then we'll see curve that isn't there.
But perspective's a very real thing, Anthony. I just don't understand why somebody who was, you know, supposedly with men in space and all this stuff, why would he want to remove such a very fundamental element of life? Why would you want to remove
then
this?
Show how much curve is supposed to be there in the first person perspective results, and obviously we don't see that. That mountain, that Elsa Craig, will be behind the curve because of perspective, because of the bulge, right? All know that. That's why they've got to get it away from that and get it into orthographic view and call it a local application of the height. No, get back to the point where you see it from 35, 38 to 40 miles away. That's perspective, and that's how we see it. Let's see that bulge. Let's see how that Elsa Craig should be behind a ball. And obviously, it isn't behind a ball because we don't live on a bloody ball. Morons.
And with that, I think I'll say, first and foremost, a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the debating panel for making this debate possible. And, of course, a massive thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in and hopefully sharing this debate. If you hated the show, well, then you know what to do. But if you liked it, consider sharing it or subscribing if you have not done so already. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!